In kindergarten, the first spelling assessment does not start until week 11. This gives the kids time to become familiar with the program first in the first 10 weeks, and it also gives them time to learn enough of the letters and letter sounds and vowel sounds in order to be able to start actually forming and spelling words. This is an example of the very first spelling test that starts in week 11. Notice that the spelling test is different from most spelling tests kids take with other programs. The kids will be spelling the words in context within a sentence. Later on in first and second grade, they'll do the same thing, except for the words will be embedded in a paragraph. But because they're in kindergarten and they're just learning their letters and sounds and learning to form words and read, these are broken down into sentences instead of paragraphs to make it easier. Notice that they'll write the words on the handwriting line. When you are giving them the test, it's best to do each one slowly and give them plenty of time to be able to fill out the words. So for example, if I was on number 1 and I was giving the test, I would read the sentence to them a few times, and then I would keep repeating the word. And maybe in the beginning, I would also really slow that word down to where they can hear each individual sound so they can spell it correctly. So if I was giving this test, I would say, I sat on a mat. I sat on a mat. Number 1 is sat. Sat. I sat on a mat. Sat. Number 1 is sat. Write the word sat in the blank by number 1. Sat. Sat. And in the beginning, you'll have to go slow like that, but eventually they will get the hang of it, and it will go faster as you go. But practicing these in sentences really makes them have to practice their listening skills as well, which is an important skill no matter what grade level they're in. But if you can build that foundation in kindergarten, it's really going to help them in first and second and their later years in school. If during the program, if you have any questions about our spelling assessments, always feel free to email me. My email address is heather@watsonworksedu.com, and I will respond to you just as soon as I can. This is an example of the second spelling assessment in our first grade phonics and spelling program. Notice that here each of the words are going to be written on handwriting lines just like we did in kindergarten, but in second grade next year when they do them, they will be just regular lines instead of the handwriting lines. When you go through the spelling test, I found it's best to do it little by little. That way you give them time to read each of the words, and then after you have gone through the whole test, we'll read it one more time through with all of the spelling words inserted so that they really understand that story or paragraph that you just read to them. So I would start by reading the title, A Rest at the Brook, and then I would read it little by little. Because the first sentence is short, I would just read the first sentence and then pause and wait for them to be able to write the word. So you would say, the trip west is hot. The trip west is hot. Number 1 is hot. Write the word hot on the line next to number 1. The trip west is hot. I would give them time to write the word, and you may have to repeat that a few more times and then move on to the second part. Now, if you notice that there's a kid struggling and you don't want one of the other kids or the other kids to have to sit there and wait for too long and get anxious, I would have them circle the number 1 and tell them we'd come back and read it again, or pull them and work with them by themselves. After we've done number 1, we would go through to the second sentence. My family and I traveled by an ox-driven wagon. My family and I traveled by an ox-driven wagon. Number 2 is ox. Write the word ox next to number 2. My family and I traveled by an ox-driven wagon. And then I would pause and give them time to write it, and then we would continue on with the rest of the test. Then at the end of the test, I would read it all with all of the spelling words inserted. The trip west is hot. My family and I traveled by an ox-driven wagon for many days. We stopped by a brook to rest. We sat on top of a log to drink and have a snack. As I look at the brook, I see a lot of fish swimming in the water. Since he loves fish, my dad gets a big smile on his face. I think I know what he's thinking. I smile too. Then, after we've gone through it, if I have any that I need to work on individually, we'll go through those ones that they've circled, or I'll pull them and work with them on their own. If at any time during the program you're doing a spelling assessment and you have any questions, always feel free to email me. My email is heather@watsonworksedu.com, and I will try to get back to you just as soon as I can. This is an example of the first spelling assessment in our second grade phonics and spelling program. Just like in kindergarten and first grade, these words are going to be embedded within a paragraph so that they have to spell the words in context. But different from kinder and first is they're not going to be written on handwriting lines. They have to practice actually writing them on a regular line. I've found whenever you do the spelling test, no matter what grade it is, it's best to go slowly and do it little by little. And then after you've gone through each of the spelling words and you finished it, go back through and read it all together with all of the spelling words inserted so that the paragraph makes more sense. So for example, on this one, I would read the title, The Pageant, and then I would read the first part until I got to the first word. So I would say, my mom and I decided to go to the next town. My mom and I decided to go to the next town. Then I would say number 1 is next. Write the word next next to number 1. And then I would read it a few more times. My mom and I decided to go to the next town. And then when I could tell that everyone was done, I would move on to the rest of the sentence. My mom and I decided to go to the next town to buy a dress at the mall for my pageant. We walked. We walked. Number 2 is walked. And then I would repeat it a few more times. So I would go through it slowly, little by little, with each spelling word with a little phrase, or if it's one that's in a whole sentence, you can say it. And then at the end, I would go through and reread it. My mom and I decided to go to the next town to buy a dress at the mall for my pageant. We walked around the mall until I finally found the perfect dress. If I wear the dress to the pageant, hopefully it will help me win. On the day of the pageant, my dress looked beautiful, but my hair was flat. I was very sad. Thankfully, my mom was able to help me and fix my hair with a curling iron. Then I was ready for the pageant. And that's how I would do each spelling assessment. If along the way throughout the program you have any questions or concerns about the spelling assessments, always feel free to email me. My email is heather@watsonworksedu.com, and I will try to email you back just as soon as I can. Thanks.